Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So this is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission, and today we are reviewing On-Ramp 2021 local fellowship proposals for the Northeast cohort. I am Paige Sharp, Deputy Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and today is Monday, October 18th, and it's 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The panelists are meeting on Zoom, and the public is observing on YouTube. At this time, I would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are currently located. And I will share the first name, and then you can go ahead and do that for us. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Chris.
Hi there, my name is Chris Acton, and I am a weaver and weaving instructor based out of Chesterton, Indiana.
Great, thank you, Chris. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Fiersteri. I am a director of activities at a long-term care facility in Goshen, Indiana, and a lover of the arts.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Phil?
My name is Phil Slane. I live in Fort Wayne, and I'm the Director of Grants and Programs at Arts United of Greater Fort Wayne.
Great, thank you, Phil. Brent?
Hi, I'm Brent Aldrich. I'm a visual artist in Indianapolis. I work as a program director at Arts for Learning Indiana. I do a variety of other curatorial and artistic-based projects here in the city.
Wonderful. Angelia?
Good morning, I'm Angelia Moore, Vice President of Edinburgh Christian Center, and I'm located here in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Great, and Tori?
Good morning, I'm Tori Williams. I'm in Marion, Indiana, Grant County, and I am the co-founder of Moving Marion Forward and a community organizer, and this is Apollo.
Thank you, Tori. That's our panel. And now we just have a couple staff here assisting today. And Maddie.
Hi, my name is Maddie Miller. I am the fellowship manager, and I am based in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Great, thank you, Maddie. And Chapin.
Hey there, Chapin Schneck, and I'm here in a tech role today.
Thanks, Chapin. So this panel is designed to gather feedback that will help the applicant strengthen their fellowship project to advance their creative career. The discussion will also help IAC staff identify any important modifications that applicants may be required to make to their fellowship project before moving forward. I will announce the application we will review. I'll ask the first reader to begin the discussion, and the first reader will provide advice to strengthen the fellowship project, focusing on the evaluation criteria from their perspective. Panelists, please note that applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. So after the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or differing comments. We are not looking for consensus. We want the applicant to receive excellent advice from the different perspectives that panelists bring to the table. After the second reader is finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we're only looking for new, additional, or differing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, and we do have a few, the panelists will be placed in the virtual waiting room while the application is discussed. And finally, once the application has been fully discussed by the panel, we ask the panel to update their comments in the online system, should they wish to. It is common for recommendations to change or maybe some thoughts to be added as a result of that broader discussion. And just a note, those changes will save automatically. If there are no questions, we're ready to begin. Anybody have any questions? Okay. So we'll start with the first applicant for On-Ramp, which is Abigail Schwantz. And our first reader is Angelia.
Good morning. Reading through the application, and it is a very strong application, very innovative. And the goals are clear, well-defined, and the timeline seems realistic. Although the timeline and project are feasible, there was concern. I did have some concern around what happens if the number of sessions desired did not happen. And so I wanted to make sure that that budget was scalable. it is realistic and sustainable, but I just want to make sure that it is scalable if she gets more or less than what she's desired. And what I really, really enjoyed was that this project brings the opportunity for women of different genders who might not necessarily be active in the arts to understand that even photography, that those things that we take for granted are considered arts and could bring more users or those who are able to enjoy the arts.
Great, thank you, Angelia. And next reader is Brent.
Yeah, I agree. This is a strong application with a lot of content. And so actually I have a lot of comments because I think there's a lot to work with. I have a little bit of, I'd like a little bit of clarity around what the goal of this specific thing is. I think the idea of this weekend, this photography marathon, makes a lot of sense. However, I think there's two different goals that I would just love some clarity about. I think as I read it, it seemed like there's a lot of potential just for building that portfolio, right? And just like if you're doing this marathon, at the end of that, you're going to come away with 15 new packages, right, of photographs that I think could really build a portfolio as much as anything and build some relationships. However, in the budget, which I will get to, these also look like they're still asking clients to pay full price for these sessions, which is great. However, that's a little bit of a different goal than just portfolio building if it truly is to like maximize the profit off of this. And so I would just love to know a little bit, what is the primary goal here? You know, is it, and you can do both, right? You can certainly do both. But that's where then when we talk about the budget and the feasibility, I think answering what the goal is would help me answer what the feasibility is. And so if, as Angelia was just saying, if you get more or less clients, that could dramatically affect if really what you're trying to do is make as much money as you can in a marathon session. If you get less clients than that, then that's not the case. Whereas if what you're trying to do is use this grant dollars to build, build new sets, get new props, purchase new equipment, all these things that like really help your portfolio look better, your clients look even better, then I think that's maybe good how it is, and that's very feasible. So I guess my question to that is like, are you using these grant dollars to help comp or offer these sessions at like a reduced price, for instance? Can you subsidize some of those a little bit? Again, if you're worried about being able to get 15 or to make it more attractive or affordable to people who might not otherwise be able to afford these sessions, I think that there could be some benefit there. And then just like looking at those budget line items a little bit more specifically, I could be reading this wrong, but I do think that I am reading a little bit of double counting in the expenses. That photographer income of $21,500 with each session at $150. The applicant did explain how that rate is calculated, which I think is good. I'm not in the hair and makeup business, but I do feel like those payments to those hairstylists, makeup artists might be low. I would look at those. But then I also see makeup person and hair person counted as separate line items in that budget. So I do think that there might be a little bit of double counting in those expenses. And finally, I'll just say that within the community engagement, again, based on what the goal of this weekend is, I do wonder about the potential for like real engagement among that group of 15 clients. You know, are there opportunities to treat that as a community that you're, you know, are you trying to build goodwill with this work? Are you trying to build more of those like word of mouth sorts of things? So is there an opportunity? Is there a kickoff event? Is there a closing event for all these women who have gone through this photography session? I think that's it for now.
Very helpful. Other comments from other panels? Chris?
I just had one kind of something to consider was in this kind of marathon session, when I looked at the timing allotted for each person, I thought that there might need to be a little more thought around that. Just the logistics of having a brand new person come in for a boudoir session and only have such a short amount of time to get comfortable and take good photographs. I didn't know if there's an opportunity to meet with them ahead of time to get to know them so they could understand what props and what setting. And I just thought that maybe that could be thought through a little more thoroughly, just to the actual process of meeting with someone and taking their photos, especially in this kind of setting, because it is meant to be, this is supposed to be very personal and very unique to you. So I just thought that that could be given a little more thought.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Okay, so it sounds like strengthen the goals, a little bit more clarity on the budget, and think through the actual workshops. Excellent. All right. Does anybody need to update anything in their evaluation comments or anything? I didn't think so. All right, good. Well, then we are fine to go ahead and go to the next application. If you want to go ahead and queue that up for yourself and the online system panelists. The next application is Audrey Johnson. And our first reader is Michelle.
I have that in the areas of goals, that, gosh, hold on one moment. I'm trying to find my little comments here.
Take your time.
I had that I needed more in the areas of goals from the artist. I love the fact that this project consists of a legacy series on song and heritage and supporting that mission. But I could not, I just needed more ways, if the artist could explain more ways in depth of the project and the timeline as well. And yeah, as far as the community involvement, again, I see great potential with this project, but just asking the artists if they can explain in more detail the opportunities that would include the public.
Great. Thanks, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And our second reader is Angelia.
So I thought this was a strong application. I appreciated knowing that this was a second in a series of a planned series. And I wanted to note that on some of my comments, I talked about the timeline, but it was updated for us to review to match what the application said. And so that was important to me. I think that if granted, the timeline is feasible, given that most of the items needed are already in place, by the project being virtual or available virtually, I think that as long as it's promoted appropriately, we could get it into the hands of a more robust population of individuals. I don't know if that is her goal or how many candidates, I mean, how many individuals saw the last one. The budget is definitely feasible. And I just think that for me, one thing that it's very innovative. I love the concept. I just want to make sure that we are able to ensure that it is seen by a multitude of people. And I don't know if that, she has $500 for, like in her budget, there's very little around how she will promote it to individuals outside of her personal network. So I'm concerned about just how we will make sure that it gets to the broader community, because this form of art is seen by a very selected group of individuals. And so because she's only sticking to the budget of the fellowship, just want to make sure that we are able to make sure we can grow the audience and get as many people to view it or be exposed to this innovative type of art.
Great, thank you, Angelia. Other thoughts?
I just kind of want to echo what Angelia just said with the engagement portion of it. I think this is a great opportunity for exposure to people who may not be familiar with this kind of art or even understand why it's necessary for them to know about it. And so looking at the budget, I saw that there were Facebook ad monies kind of set aside, but I'm wondering if the artist has considered sort of what other avenues of marketing that are available that are free. And then, or maybe even low cost. And so connecting with youth or youth engagement organizations would be a fantastic thing to see as the plan for this project continues.
Great. Other suggestions that you might have, Tori, for marketing in those free or simple ways? Sorry,
Yeah, so
lighting went out.
Using your digital neighborhood is probably the easiest thing to do. You, if we're on social media, you have your own digital network, and that's your people. And so figure out who they are connected to and how you can push this out. Facebook targeted ads are good, but they don't necessarily provide the same sort of personal aspect that a personal touch in your digital neighborhood could add. So as you look at planning how this will get marketed out, that's a really important aspect for this application in particular.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Other thoughts, input?
Yeah, just agree with those. I'm a little unclear who the audience for this is. I would love to hear more about that based on what everyone's just said. And then specifically, did just want to call to attention, because I think it's a positive of this one within this budget. I really appreciate that it's a pretty limited scope. It's 4 episodes. I think it's not biting off more than can be, chewed within this, $2,000 budget. And so I do just want to call out, rather than trying to do 100 of these and stretch everything too thin, I think limiting it to 4 is very smart. And paying other artists for their work in this, I think, is accounted for, which is really good.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Phil?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed up in the goals section was a mention about longevity and the idea of finding some corporate sponsors to help to keep this going past the duration of the fellowship, which I think is a great idea. Would love to hear a little bit more about some specific goals there, especially if you want to use this fellowship as an opportunity to try to secure some of that funding from corporate sponsors. And then at the same time, taking that a step further and maybe looking at how that would impact your budget from an income and expense perspective. So, if you were able to set a goal and meet that goal for corporate sponsorship here in this next season of interviews, what would that translate to in additional expenses that you might also be able to include to continue to, either elevate the interview process, or, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, some other outlets for promotion and marketing to garner some more views for the series as well. I think there are some good aspects there that could be explored here too.
Really helpful, guys. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. We'll go ahead and update if you have any updates that you need to make in that particular evaluation. Otherwise, go ahead and queue up Drew Fletcher. And when you're ready, and take your time, Chris. Chris will be our first reader.
I'm ready.
Oh,
Yes, let's do it. I thought there was such enthusiasm in this proposal. It was really, you could feel the passion. So it was written in such a way that I was like, yes, let's do all the things. And I think one of my first thoughts was that in the kind of goals section, they talk about focusing on zero waste and repurposing, but they also talk about inclusivity. And I think those are both amazing, fabulous goals. My concern is doing both. At least at this point, I think from a marketing perspective, a branding perspective, that can get a little muddy. So my thought was, is there a way to choose one of those and really lean in, especially as you're developing this line, and you're kind of finding your identity. I think it may be a little simpler route to choose one side or the other, the kind of zero waste or the inclusivity kind of side of it. Just from personal perspective, I know that when I try to do all the things, no one thing becomes very clear. So I think that could be something for them to consider. I also, as I looked through the feasibility part, the amount for the photo shoot kind of raised an eyebrow. Now, I understand that in some cases you know the photographer and they will give you a nice discount or something. But I find that especially if you're going to do a whole line, you're going to need a lot of images for that. So my thought was that's probably going to demand a higher price. Now, again, I didn't get a read on if they know the photographer, if there's some kind of discount, because I've been in that position before. But that was the one thing in the feasibility that I thought that may need just a second look, just to make sure that they have everything covered and they can do a great job, have really good quality photographs for that. And as for the community engagement, boy, I thought there's so much potential here. And I would love to see the panelists really kind of flush this out a little more. Who are they working with, and who are the mentors and partners? And I just thought, if you're developing a clothing line, let's have a runway. Let's do something with the community so you can really bring people in to see, look at this amazing work that I have done in this particular project. There's just so much potential there. And I thought that portion in particular could really use a little beefing up. Those are my comments.
great. Thank you, Chris. Our second reader is Michelle.
I too also was super excited to, see those buzzwords: sustainability, clothing, reusing things that already exist in the world to create new fashion. Again, I agree with what Chris said in the fact that it has just great potential for community outreach, and also wondering about how the fashion will be used to pull together the community. And yeah, I really appreciate the potential of this this artist and her work. So I don't have anything else.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Other comments? Angelia, you're muted.
I think we all have comments. I'll go quick then. So I had the opposite reaction than Chris when she talked about one or the other. I thought it was beautiful to marry them together, because ultimately inclusion is kind of justice work, and environmental justice is something that gets left out of the inclusion conversation. So I was really excited to see those put together. The other piece that I was interested in is whether or not, when we look at inclusion, I know there was some mention of body types, but as far as like models, like age and things like that, to kind of expand community in that aspect. And then as we're all talking, I'm thinking, well, a pop-up runway is pretty inexpensive to do, and could be something that could really engage the community. So if you're not familiar with a pop-up runway, it's basically where you get your people together in a crowd of people and you have a fashion show.
I want to do one of those. Sounds like fun.
I'm not sure anybody wants my fashion, but I would love to participate.
Aw.
So I had a couple comments. For the community engagement, I was concerned about the artists using their network. And I see where they'll use their peers and associates, but how do we, I don't know who those individuals are. How do we make this a broader community engagement? I thought that I agree with Tony. I love Terry. I love that the information was inclusive. I wanted to do the both. So, if you can recreate something that already exists and to make it something great, that part enlightened me and engaged me and kind of excited me. But I would love to see, like, how is this going to be showcased? Where will we see this grand work? And if we are doing, how do we make this beneficial for the artist as well as arts in a whole? Like, once you create these things, where will we see them? So the pop-up fashion show, I did not think of that, but that is a fantabulous idea that will just get it to where individuals know that this is even possible. So instead of donating everything to Goodwill or, giving it someplace where it's going to sit again, is there a place where this artist could gather articles or have someone make a memory outfit? As a mom of four, I would love something that was made from something involved for them. So, like, is there a way where others can join in or support that would make this hit a broader network? And a strong education advocate, I'm thinking, could kiddos make something in school? This is a model that could be duplicated elsewhere. And how do we broaden that sustainability to get that information on? How do we use this concept to stop throwing everything away or pushing it to the side, to be, stronger with our environment, but also create something that is only unique to individuals?
Great feedback. Other thoughts? Brent?
Well, Phil, go ahead. He raised his hand. I just unmuted myself.
It's okay. I'm not sure what the protocol should be here.
There is no protocol. You just talk, I guess.
Cool. I'm okay with that. So there's a lot here, I feel like, in the way of the creation, the marketing, and the promotion for this clothing line, which I think is great. It's really well fleshed out. I would challenge the applicant to think a little bit about, and maybe this isn't necessarily a goal for them, but whether or not they plan to sell any of these pieces of clothing and whether or not that's going to generate any revenue for them. And along with that, some of the partnerships that were mentioned, a lot of great stuff. I loved that there was a mention about learning from your competitors. I think that's a fantastic thing. Oftentimes we get into that adversarial kind of mentality with competitors, and it's good to realize that there's a lot that we can still gain and learn from them. In addition to building some of those connections, maybe there are some connections within the community that can help you on the retail side of things too, some partnerships with local boutiques or shops that would be willing to, host some of your clothing for sale, just as a source of revenue to continue this momentum moving forward as well.
And then I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the budget. And I'm actually glad that this one came right after the last one, because what I said in that last one about, like, there's 4 discrete things, and I think that's reasonable. I do worry that fabricating 50 new unique pieces for this one is just going to stretch the budget and the time, perhaps, in a way that's setting the artist or the applicant up for less than success, right? My personal preference, and this may be just me too, is maybe it's not 50, maybe it's 15, or maybe it's 10. So what are ways, in my mind, to invest more heavily in each individual garment with this budget, in a way that each one of those can really just be exceptional, doesn't stretch the applicant too far, and then maybe leave some more budget available to pay some other costs that might come up, whether that's paying a photographer more. If you're doing a whole photo shoot and you need hair and makeup and lighting and site scouting and whatever else, maybe there's some other ways to reinvest in some of those collaborators as well. So yeah, I would just really consider, I think, we all want to make 1,000 things, but so what are maybe a way to scale that back and invest more heavily, spend more time with fewer things, just as even proof of concept if this is a new brand really being created.
I'm going to ask, just fly this out here. So there's a lot of great strengthening feedback that you guys are providing that I think is really, really exciting. And I have to wonder, what would really translate to the applicant? Is there something that you feel needs to be required of them before they would move forward with this project? We can certainly give them all of this feedback for consideration. But in terms of, is there something that you would want us to require them to change? Any thoughts on that? It's a vexing question I just posed. Sorry about that, guys. We can.
This is Angelia. For me, I don't know if I want them to change anything. I want them to look at what their goals are and understand their own limitations. Because unlike visual arts or performing arts, a multitude of people can appreciate those at one time. But if I make a fashion piece in a size 4, I can only sell that to someone who would appreciate a size 4. So for this particular type of art, I just want them to understand that they might, like Brent said, 50 pieces. If you don't have an audience for those 50 pieces, you just have 50 pieces. So even though we've saved the environment, we've utilized some things, what's going to happen to those 50 pieces? So either identify, 50 pieces for someone, a piece for someone on the Arts Council, a piece for a key figure in their recycle world, or who are these pieces going to go to so that they are utilized and not made and then have to sit, because fashion is not something that can be universally utilized. And so that was my only, if they are to think about something, I don't think they necessarily have to change things. I think they need to think about, because I believe you can create 50 pieces. You can create 50 pieces, and if you are a seamstress or a fashion designer and you're speedier than I am with needle and thread, that's not going to be the issue. The issue is when you get these 50 pieces, who is going to be in your, even if we did the pop-up show, who's going to wear those 50 pieces to even get them seen? So either you have to identify the people up front, because they talked about size inclusivity and all of those things, which are great, but you would have to identify who those people are who are going to wear those fashions that come out of this fellowship, so that others can participate and say, oh yes, you're right, this is size inclusivity. Everyone can purchase from him or her, and everyone can be, excited about it. But if you create it based on your own thoughts and you don't have identified individuals, you're going to have things that can't be utilized, which defeats the whole purpose of the recycle piece that is boldly identified in this application.
Very helpful. Thank you. Unless anybody else had other thoughts? Okay. Well, then go ahead and queue up the next application, which is Emily Guerrero. And when you're ready, Brent, you're the first reader.
Okay. Pretty straightforward on a lot of this. This is largely purchasing equipment of an iPad and storage solutions for this artist to make themselves more, they had a great quote, to improve organization, to strengthen professional productivity and time management. Very clear goal. Very limited scope in terms of purchasing that equipment and storage. So that goal seems very good and very tied to their larger career goals, where they teach and travel and need to be remote. And organized. In terms of the feasibility, they even limited it to a 3-month timeline, which makes sense. Again, it's primarily an equipment purchase. Budget is pretty clear. Apple, when you're buying an iPad, until you actually hit purchase, it's a little hard to know exactly what you're going to pay. So there's a little bit of flexibility in there, which makes sense. The only, I think some comments I would have on that budget. It sounds like this is somebody who's maybe purchasing this iPad for the first time and wanting to make sure that keeps them organized and gives them capacity to work remotely. I would definitely recommend something like additional storage, whether that's external hard drives, whether that's cloud backup. All those things need to be backed up and stored elsewhere, because if that iPad fizzles and everything is lost, that would be a setback, wouldn't it? So I would just maybe consider that in your total budget for the applicant, and so that might adjust some things. I think that's the only feasibility comment I had, though. And then related to community engagement, within the scope of this specific proposal, it really is just this equipment, and so it doesn't seem like community engagement is a large part of this particular proposal. However, I guess, so I could just talk related to their larger career goals, as there is this goal to expand the geographic reach of workshops. There's things mentioned like potentially creating products to sell online. I would definitely encourage a little bit more strategy. And again, this is maybe beyond the scope of this very particular project, but strategy about like, what are targeted audiences to expand to? There's mention from the applicant about libraries or social service organizations, but like, what are those? Are there targeted collaborators, other artists? It does seem like there's, beyond just the artists, they've created an organization, and maybe that's an LLC, maybe that's a 501c3. Is there a capacity to bring in other collaborators, whether that's artists, educators, whatever? But I think that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Brent. Chris?
I think Brent did a great job of covering it. My only additional thought was simply by the applicant receiving this equipment, is there some kind of event that can be for the community that goes with this? Is there some kind of tie into the community from this piece of equipment? Is there something where she can celebrate what's going on? Or I just thought that for the community engagement portion, that is there some kind of presentation where she can be using this new equipment and giving folks a little taste of what she can do? Just I felt like there might be opportunity to connect the dots a little stronger between the community and her proposal. That was my only thought.
Great, thank you. Any other input? Michelle?
I just had that, and also maybe a portion of monies being designated for training, because oftentimes we get new equipment and we don't necessarily allocate funds to that, thinking that we're able to just figure it out. But sometimes it's nice to have someone to help you walk through that.
Here on that one, personal experience. Tori, you also were going to jump in.
I guess now I'm echoing what Michelle just said, but also as far as the application itself, it was very clear what the goal was and what the purpose was. But for me, when I looked at the art and the website, it was clear why it was needed. And so I'm not sure if that's something that's even applicable at this point, but it would have been helpful when reading the application to kind of know specifically like what type of pieces would be needed to store or needed to photograph, and then what happens with those, but also, yes, if you get technology, build in money for training or find a tech support person, because yes, it is not always easy.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts? All right, great. Well, I think we're good to go then with Emily. Then go ahead and queue up Isaac Benjamin Dees. And when you're ready, Phil, you're our first reader.
All righty. So this was a really interesting project. In particular, I really liked that they were looking to help support and promote the artistic community, as well as giving individual artists a platform to talk about their personal experiences and their stories. And I really enjoyed watching through some of the content that had already been created, which was a great addition to this application. The one thing that I didn't fully understand was what exactly the applicant meant whenever they used the term nexus or network. It was clear that this partnership would help to promote and advocate for artists and arts, but then there were mentions of connecting artists to resources and creating a kind of permanent collaborative community that didn't feel quite as fleshed out as I would have wanted it to be. For example, is this network of artists already being connected to resources outside of the interviews that are being produced? And if not, what kind of plans or goals do you have in place to establish additional resources for the artists that are engaging with this network beyond those interviews? For me, I think I would have liked to have seen it go in one of two directions, either seeing the community network part of the project really be a little bit more developed and some specific goals created for that purpose. Or I think at the same time, it would be absolutely fine too to just double down on the interview and the advocacy and the promotion aspect of things, since that part of this project does seem to be very, very well defined. Everything in the budget made sense to me from a feasibility standpoint, but I did find myself asking how exactly this supports the goals that were mentioned in the first section. The interviews that have been created so far are really quite good when it comes to their quality. So, how exactly would the purchase of new equipment help to support your goal of doubling the number of interviews that you're able to conduct? The applicant also mentioned recruiting a team, but in the budget, there's really only compensation for an editor. So I found myself wondering as well if that's something that needs to be revisited in the budget area. Kind of curious to know if the interviews that have been conducted so far have involved a production team of perhaps volunteers, and maybe that's the reason it's not included in the budget, or if it's solely been the applicant and the production team is a new addition as part of the on-ramp fellowship. Since this is a media project as well, I was also wondering as I was looking through the budget if perhaps some money should be budgeted for marketing and promotion. Increasing the quality is obviously a great thing, but it doesn't necessarily translate into more views, which is ultimately what you want to see in order to grow this even further. From a community engagement perspective, I love that it's about bringing awareness to arts and artists in Fort Wayne, literally steeped in the community engagement from that perspective. But that said, I think there are ways that the applicant could take this a step further on the community engagement front. Perhaps looking whether or not they could partner with the artists who are featured and the organizations that they're affiliated with to help promote these videos when they're released. Or maybe even perhaps partnering with a venue like the Clyde or Wunderkammer or Purdue Fort Wayne here in Fort Wayne to host the filming of these interviews while also helping to promote the interviews through their own marketing channels. And so those were some of my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Michelle?
I think Philip covered it. I too think that this artist's work has potential for engaging the community in such a way and sharing different artists and their focus in the media. I think it's something that community artists often look for someone to help them do that. So it has a really great set of substance to it. But I also noted that more information is needed on how they will cultivate that relationship with the community.
Good. Other comments? Agree, disagree?
I just want to say that, yeah, I agree with what both of you said. This is the kind of application too that I got excited to read, want to brainstorm with this app, so just that out. I think the energy is there, as we point out in another one. I think that this, again, largely an equipment purchase, really, in terms of how the budget is laid out. So related to the goals, but I think I have a little bit of trouble just reading it because the budget is truly like a equipment purchase, you know, and it's well over 2,000. Like the 2,000 is going to help this applicant get there. But then the goals are almost like all career goals, right? Which are exciting, which are fun to think about. So I think just clarifying, as Michelle and Phil have already said, clarifying what those specific goals are would help me understand how this budget gets to that, because I'm a little bit unsure, which direction that goal is headed. But it's exciting.
So how it ties together, essentially. How does the goal tie to the equipment and budget, and then deepen community engagement? Great. Love to hear all of this enthusiasm for these projects. I'm just like, oh man, I wish I would have read all of these. This is great. All right, awesome. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right, really, you guys are powerful team here. Okay, the next applicant is Janelle Sloan, and our first reader is Tori.
I was ready until you said my name. So excuse me while I squint. I want to make sure that I'm capturing everything I said correctly. I thought that this was a really clear, concise application, and it was a compelling project also. I love when I can read an application and it makes me dream, and this one made me dream about the possibility of what would come from it. As far as community engagement, I think that that's a built-in aspect of the project, and it's pretty clearly defined. It seems as if the applicant has already taken steps to first engage the community, to get permissions, and also to think out how to continue the engagement and even what the impact in the community is for this project. The only issue that I did see was with feasibility. The budget is incredibly clear, but it's right at the $2,000 mark. And so I'm wondering if there's any wiggle room for the cost of materials, especially knowing how much lumber costs and things like that have changed over the last couple of years. And so that's really the only concern is the budget. You know, how do you make this happen knowing that you don't quite know what it's going to cost given the time frame and the time that we live in? So that's it. There was one place on the application for the in-kind cost where it was listed in the paragraph, but not listed in the actual total. And so that would be the only change that needs to be made.
Great, thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I would agree with Tori. I got a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm reading through this application. Found myself in the same boat, getting really excited about what this could end up looking like up in the Angelia area. A couple of my thoughts, just kind of working through the application with regards to the creative work and the resume that was submitted. I would have liked to have seen it be a little bit more of a focused collection of past work. The website link that was submitted was helpful and kind of gave a general idea, but didn't really tie specifically into the project and what the project was aiming to accomplish from a larger kind of mural standpoint. So being able to see some of that and kind of get more of a visual perspective of what this would ultimately look like in the end, I think would have been helpful for me. From a budgeting perspective and from a feasibility perspective, I think I also would have really enjoyed hearing about what kind of promotion effort is going to go into sharing this opportunity with the community. How do they plan to get the word out? Are there things that they can do, such as marketing and promotion, but also maybe doing some events at their studio to get some natural reach and get folks in and talk about the opportunity and get some folks on board? Or maybe there are some expenses that need to be budgeted there for as well, beyond just the cost of materials that have been listed here in the application. From a community engagement standpoint, totally agree. It's a great project. I love that people are going to be coming from the community to put all of this together, that it's not just one person doing it. I think there's a lot of great stuff going on here.
Fantastic, thank you. Other comments?
So like everybody else, I was like geeked around this one. I was like, oh, we could do this here and we can do this here. This application spoke to everything that we asked for on the in the process. But my question was, or my statement is, I'm not sure if any of the artists understood what they could do around the in-kind support. So and so this one was the one where it really stuck out to me, because the budget, and I think someone's already mentioned it, doesn't take into account, after the pandemic, just labor, materials, those type of things have gone up so much. But is there an in-kind donor? And this is not just for this applicant, but for all the applicants that could really help them get to where they want to go, which also brings in that community connection and engagement. So for this one particularly, I would love to see a lumber yard or a trail yard or someplace that has like the lumber to build the fence or to clean the wall before the mural. Like, who can help this artist get what they need, who might not even think about the arts, but be willing to support in that way. So I think that one thing I noticed across all the applicants was a lack of using in-kind support as a way to engage the community. And for this one, because there was so much conversation around how to get the artists together, there are other individuals who would be willing to support if they knew there was a need. And so some of that budgeted items for cost, for materials, could be reduced if you reached out and asked those questions. So that was my biggest thought process around this. Like, how can we make this truly a community project? And by that be by getting those contractors and other individuals involved who might not think about it.
I had just a couple of thoughts too, just to kind of piggyback off what everyone said, is that first of all, from a logistic perspective, I love the fact that it's all about the community, which I found part of me as I read this thought, but what about you? I felt like this community project is wonderful, but how does this also help you as an artist go forward? Especially because the community is going to be doing the painting and doing all of this part of it. So I just felt like it would be nice to have a little more information about how does this solidly help you grow yourself as an artist and an entrepreneur. Just a little more of a connection to where this goes. Just because, this person is the core of all of this. How does this, is this just simply for the community? I would like part of it to be, does it start to then market her business herself, or does it, is there some other, I just was looking for a little more of a connection between, because the community element was so strong in this one. And then how does this tie back into her work? The other thing was just kind of a logistic thing I was thinking through, is that as this is specifically a community project, I think just something just to kind of be aware of is that as you are leading a community project, it is going to be important to think through what decisions you're letting the community make and what things you aren't. Because I know in the proposal, they said that the community would have input on the design and the community would be doing the actual artwork. Okay, I see some just kind of little bells go off in that scenario, because the idea is that the person doing the proposal needs to be steering the boat. And so is there a way to give the community two options? The design can be this or this, things that he or she is already approved of. So that it doesn't become this kind of long drawn out and there's too many voices, there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians kind of idea. So I would just say for the execution of the project, that's just something to kind of think through, is that the community should absolutely be involved, but in some ways there needs to be parameters that this person sets up before the community is involved.
Got it. Anything else?
One last thing Chris triggered for me. She mentions that this will be the first of many. And so I made the assumption that her personal achievement would be she is the voice behind all of these community engaged art projects. And so I thought that was her personal goal, because she mentioned that this is the first of many. And again, to Chris's statement around who is leading this ship, again, that could be a volunteer leader. That could be, again, those in-kind, I've learned bringing the business model into arts or education is always shunned upon, because I don't want to cramp anyone's style. But if she is a teacher, or this I don't know if I didn't even see if it was a male female. This person is a teacher, so they might have that classroom control, be able to control the group that way. But if not, there is the ability to bring in a volunteer leader to lead that conversation, host that conversation, and get them to someplace easily without having, the whole area chiming in on what they all want, like you said. So I just think leaning into those in-kind donations is going to be across the board, how we can see not one project or one piece, but how we can really bring the community back in. Because you can get a leader that will volunteer enough time to set a template and baseline to get these things done.
Got it. Great. Thank you. And thank you for that thought in general on in-kind. Tori?
One more thing. Thanks, Chris, because I hadn't really thought about it that way either. I think in my mind, I saw her leading this. So what I'm wondering is if the artist could consider creating a series of designs and then let the public decide what they want to see or find, something like that to engage the public, but also to say, this is my work. And I'm inviting you into my work because we are community, like that, round out the project to me.
Great idea. Okay, so it's 11:30. I think we should go ahead and take a break. I know that we've been doing the panel since live at only a half an hour, but we've been here for a while. So is everybody okay taking a quick 10-minute break? All right, cool. All right, I will see you back here at 11:40. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and see if we can get started. We'll just kick around here a little bit and make sure Brent and Michelle are back. And Angelia, of course. All right, there's Brent. Narrowing him down. So our next person, okay, here she comes. Great. So we have, do we have Michelle? Was she here just 2 seconds ago? And or was she not here and I hallucinated that? It happened. Okay. Lucas Clevenger is our next applicant, right? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure Michelle is here. Michelle, are you around?
And while she's returning, I will be adding Tori to the waiting room. She'll be in purgatory during this, review.
Our wonderful Tori has a conflict of interest, so she will step out of the discussion. But we promise to bring her back, of course. Let's see, Angelia and then Chris. Okay.
Are we ready?
Yeah, well, I'm sure Michelle will.
Oh, I can wait. I can wait a few seconds.
Yeah, it's been a couple minutes. She's probably got kids running around doing something that they do. There she is. All right, great. Yeah, go for it, Angelia.
Okay, so again, this is one where I love the application. I thought I think whenever I see what is not traditionally considered art, I get excited because not coming from the art world, I think this is a way for me to see things in my community in a better light. So this one really spoke to me around utilizing this artist's specific art category and how to engage this in the community. So the community engagement was fantabulous. I just thought it spoke to so many ways that you see people pick random art. And I really thought it was really cute not cute, but really at the side of the community is like, you can see this art living and breathing on different people all across the area, but not just the area. Wherever they go, they can talk about this artist and how this project really impacted them, and they were able to choose something from it. And so I thought that was really really open and honest on how they could do it. The budget was really, again, kind of around technology or tools of the trade. So not a lot to flush out there. I always, again, I think someone mentioned before, is there going to be an offset of cost for the individuals who receive these tattoos to and be a part of their portfolio? So is there, because they're participating or choosing one of these these pieces of art for their work, will they be offset, or how will we recognize those who are now part of this living portfolio? So those were my feedback and concerns. Great. But it does talk about how this artist plans to make this a bigger picture project. So I like that.
Nice, thanks. Chris?
Yeah, Angelia, I totally agree. I thought this was a very nice proposal. I love in the goals section how they talk about the connection between tattooing and travel. I thought that was just really fascinating, and they did a good job of painting the picture of who they are as an artist and what influences them, which I thought was important to get a vibe for who they are and what they're looking for. And the other just kind of note that I had was the idea of traditional tattooing. Now, I know zero about tattooing, so this is really interesting. And I didn't even, I'm sure there's different categories, but the idea of traditional tattooing, I had never really heard of that. And I thought, wouldn't that be an amazing opportunity to share your information and what you've learned from your travels with the community in some way, whether it be online or something in the shop or something. I just thought that the idea of traditional tattooing, is there some way they could lean into that more, and that could be part of their kind of information experience that they share with, even if it's just something in the shop, or I just felt like that was a place that was really a cool opportunity for them to kind of share with people around them their knowledge and experiences.
Thank you. Other input, other thoughts, comments?
With this application, again, kind of being more about a purchasing of equipment, I did kind of find myself again wondering how exactly that connected back into the goals that were mentioned in the first section. It seems like a lot of the long-term career goals for this particular applicant are, financial independence, being able to do some traveling, and more discussions, advocacy work within the realm of traditional tattooing. And it wasn't specifically laid out how the purchases that were listed in this application would correlate to furthering towards those goals. That's one area that I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about. Along the lines of what some of the other panelists have said, from a community engagement standpoint, this sounds like a really cool project. I think going beyond the borders of what the applicant currently has laid out from a community engagement standpoint, to see what they could do in the way of finding places where they could talk to individuals about traditional tattooing and how it differs from some of the other forms of tattooing. Maybe they could do some workshops, or find a photographer to partner with that could take photographs of the work that they've already done and have it be kind of an art show. I think there are lots of opportunities with this particular art form to find some really creative partnerships and engagement opportunities. So I would just encourage the applicant to maybe think some of that through, and maybe find some of those opportunities and find some ways that they can help to use that as a springboard for additional promotional and marketing efforts.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts?
Okay, so Chris, you triggered something for me. So using like social media and like, I know that a lot of artists are on social media and Instagram, but I would love to see like a page dedicated to see where the art traveled. And so, if I have a tattoo and I go to Spain, you could see this art in Spain this week, like having, letting us see where, to us, to many people, $2,000 is a small investment, but seeing this $2,000 headed to Spain and headed to, just the, almost like where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, like having that work live in so many places, for one, could show that art never dies, but two, the impact of what happens when you invest in what you think is a small investment can lead to changing the world and the view of arts around the world. So.
Very clever. Love it. Other thoughts? Okay, well, great. I think we're good to go. And the next applicant that we'll be looking at is Matthew J. Brown. Let's go ahead and let Tori back in so we don't forget her. Here she is. And Michelle, you're the first reader on this one. For Matthew J. Brown. Michelle, you're muted, girl. I know, gets me every time.
Sorry. I think, again, another really potentially great avenue for an artistry that doesn't get highlighted much in the realm. And I think it has a lot of potential with working in the community and for what it can bring to that community. I think that for goals, I needed to see a little bit more specifics in the goals and how the project would be accomplished. Let's see. I see so much potential in this artist has, producing engineering and performance, and it would be great to have that translated into maybe more specifics, as well as, and I don't know about the music realm like this, but in my mind, it may be a lot to bite off at one time, as far as the timeline and feasibility for the project. But I think that it does really have, I put this project is a big one. It has so many moving parts that it may be hard to accomplish it in the timeline, and that the maybe focusing on smaller pieces of it may actually be more feasible, as well as manageable when putting it out into the community. But it has such great community bones to it. I mean, sharing it with different areas and introducing it to young people and creative writing, and I mean, those partnerships that can be developed. Yeah, it's so as far as, yeah, I put for the community engagement, just for the artists to speak more to how the community will be involved in the actual involvement of the studio itself and how they will be cultivated into that.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Anything else? Okay, I didn't want to just like step over you. All right, great. I think the next person, Tori, you're the second reader.
So a couple of thoughts with the application. I thought that the desire to sort of soundproof was community engagement in a way that we don't necessarily think of it all the time. And so, full disclosure, I work underneath a music studio, so so I know how helpful it can be to have a little bit of buffer between the sound of between creativity sometimes, right? And so I thought that was really good. One of the issues that did come up for me was the budget. As I looked at the overall budget, there was a space where the rent was $300 a month, but that wasn't included for the duration of the project. So I was kind of curious, like what that, how do you navigate that? What does that look like? Because that's a lot more money than what is technically listed in the budget. And that's pretty much it. Other than that, I think Michelle kind of captured it really well. I would have loved to see some, it's kind of clear cut. Like you want to, create a space for you to create that's healthy. But also like, what do you do with that afterwards when it comes to community engagement beyond just the, not disturbing the neighbors, but is this a space that we open, and how do you promote that it's open, that kind of thing? Is there an opportunity for additional revenue as you have this space? Is this something you can rent out? Is this something that you can find sponsors to provide people to come in to use the space? And so that's it.
Great. Other thoughts? Other people think this seems like a big project as well?
I think, and thanks for saying how you just said that, Tori, that's really helpful. I think that just being clear about what the goal is on this one, I think that a lot more was written about the like long-term future goal with this like 15 unit residency studio sort of space. Whereas I think, as I understand the scope of this particular ask, it really is just soundproofing, framing out soundproofing this one recording studio. So I think that, and I just wanted to clarify what that is, I guess would help me. If it truly is just soundproofing that one studio space, that sounds doable and feasible to me. That read to me, again, as Tori just kind of helped me clarify, that sounds like a pretty personal studio space that will ultimately hopefully separate and benefit this applicant's own creative space apart from what's going on around too, which sounds workable. But yeah, I was a little bit unclear, just distinguishing that, I guess, from the larger career goal. If that is, I did make some other notes, if that larger goal of like this large sort of multi-tenant creative space, I think that is a great goal, but also want to understand like how this ties to that, right? So the scope of this current proposal, I think, could be seen as some kind of proof of concept. However, I definitely want to just some healthy caution about, like the scale difference. We're talking actually multiple, like from $2,000 to multi-million in that. And so there's a lot of steps in between that. And what is that? And then I also just want to make sure that in the best interest of this artist, it sounds like they've got kind of a sweetheart handshake deal for their studio space right now. And I just absolutely want to look out for them and make sure that is well documented. I don't know this artist or this space at all, but yeah, because I don't want $2,000 to make this space better for this artist, and then the building owners to say, hey, we think we have a better use for this space now. So just a word of caution there.
Other thoughts?
I just
To
wanted
go-
to add someone who's visually impaired. I was clapping as Brent said that because that is absolutely necessary.
To go to what Brent said, also, if this is such a sweet deal for this artist, for this space, for this location, like this is so specific. Again, those in-kind, that's not what retail, that's not what business space or warehouse space cost. And so were we documenting the retail value of that space so that the budget looks like what it is? Because there has to be some kind of in-kind offset to what he's paying currently.
Anything else? All right, great feedback. Thank you. Okay, so our next application is Rhonda Newsom, and the first reader, when you're ready, is Chris. And then Chris, when you're done, it's Angelia, if you just want to go ahead and chime in after her.
All right. I liked this one. The idea of having an exhibit and then a scholarship that goes with, that just seems like this person has a very generous heart, and you have to appreciate that. As far as in the goals section, I had a little bit of confusion about the spaces. The Sky and Earth Studio, if they have a brick and mortar space versus the nonprofit art gallery that they're working with, I wasn't real clear on if they are one and the same, or if I just wasn't clear about the actual space for where the event would take place versus what the applicant has already going. And I think for me, I would love to hear more about the scholarship piece. Who is it for? Who can apply? What are the parameters? Some of those kind of elements. I would have loved to see that just a little more fleshed out so we could kind of paint a more vivid picture of what that looks like. What are you working towards? How many? Some of those kind of things. I thought in the feasibility section that they mentioned the People's Choice Award, and I thought that could come from, like Angelia, you've talked about the in-kind. Is there some kind of a sponsorship, or does it, if the artists are paying a fee to participate in the exhibit, does that money cover some of these costs? So I thought that there was some ways to kind of rework the overall cost of the exhibit. Just some more kind of creative ways to figure out those numbers. Also, if they're working with an established gallery space, they may already have pedestals and easels, which were mentioned in the budget, as far as purchasing those new. And that may also tie in back to the idea of space. I'm not quite understanding how the space works. So if they're working with a nonprofit gallery space, they may already have these kind of items for the exhibit, so they don't have to purchase those. So it was more, these are more kind of questions than anything else there. And then my last thought was just about the show itself. Is there a theme? Are there guidelines? What does the show look like? Who can apply? Some of those kind of questions. I would have loved to just see more details about how they envision this coming together.
So for me, I think I had the most concern around the budget. The concept is fabulous. But when I look at the budget, I'm looking to see that everything that we discussed or that was written is actually outlined in the budget and shows where those funds will go and are received. The writer also states that they have an LLC. And so if this is a scholarship, is it going to run through a nonprofit? But the scholarship is not listed out in the budget. So that $1,500 is nowhere. And so is it going to be in kind? Is it going to be from sales? It still should be listed out so that we can see, again, the impact. And like Chris said, who is a scholarship for? There is a fee for artists, so I'm okay with that. But like, how many artists are expected and what is that fee so that you can get to the additional $500 for the 3 scholarships? Because based on the budget that has been, the expenses today, or the total projected expenses is $2,265, which doesn't include the $1,500. So where does that come from and how do you get there? And who will monitor and oversee like the selection of the scholarships?
Good point. Other comments?
Yeah, I like this application a whole lot. I think the community engagement piece is so baked into this whole application in a really nice way. Here's my take on it, and I feel like I say this about several of these. I just want to make sure that this applicant is getting paid what they need to get paid, is paying everyone else and covering all their costs well. And this is such a big, robust application that it, again, to my mind, feels like it could be 2 distinct projects almost. As I read it, this community art show and scholarship fundraiser, that feels like a whole piece. That feels like that $2,000 could go just towards that. Or this whole piece about creating an LLC, building out a website, branding, and building out the studio, that feels like that's a whole piece, and again, I just want to make sure that, as Angelia just said, that budget is really accounting the full costs, and that this applicant doesn't get themselves into a tough place trying to do too much and having to, fund out of pocket a lot of this work.
I agree with kind of what everyone said. I think that it's hard to limit someone's idea because this is so it's like just awesome within itself. So instead of limiting it, maybe reimagining what it would look like to have 2 projects going simultaneously, putting your funds in one place and seeing what community engagement can you get to kind of work on the other project. And so they're both underneath this artist, but they can work simultaneously and still not break the bank, right? Because you want to use the money wisely and you also want to figure out how to generate something from it. So just maybe reimagining what it looks like to do both projects, because she's really explicit that there's two reasons for this money. And so, if someone can donate space, then that means you don't have to spend this piece. And so just looking at, refiguring the budget and kind of reimagining what it looks like to bring both to fruition.
This was an application too where I would have liked to have seen more usage of the in-kind section, especially looking at some of the expenses in the budget. Are there some things there like the pedestals that are going to be used for this community art show? Is that somebody that you could talk to about building those as opposed to purchasing them? Is there a local restaurant that you could talk to about donating food for this community art show and hors d'oeuvres and beverages and things like that? I think the more the applicant thinks about some of those opportunities would be a good thing, because ultimately what that translates into is more money that can be directed towards these scholarships, which seems like the kind of overarching goal of that particular aspect of the project.
Great. Anything else? Very helpful. Okay, great. We are going to move on to Sarah Schwab, and our first reader is Brent, and the second reader is Phil. So when Brent's done, Phil, just go ahead and take it away.
Get my combination of notes here. Okay. So this one, I thought the goal is pretty clear, not unlike the last one that I read first. This is a lot of equipment sort of thing, developing an online store to market and sell artwork. Very clear. The applicant noted that online sales last couple of years in particular have grown immensely, which I think is a good timing for this. And I think that this pretty clearly relates to their overall career goals of being able to make this a productive full-time income. In terms of feasibility, I really appreciate how clear this timeline was, not just for this project, but here's year 1, here's year 2, year 3, year 4. And the materials budget for supplies looks very reasonable with like actual quotes. I will say on that, and I might just need some clarification on this. There were a couple items mentioned in the narrative part that I didn't really see reflected in the budget that feel like they could be major. There's a line about purchasing quality camera and lighting equipment. But in the budget, I'm only seeing $125 for that, which could be immensely low depending on what that camera and lighting equipment means. So I do think that might be low. And then I also, I don't see a line item in expenses. Let me just pull that up quickly so it's in front of me. I don't see a line item at all related to building out the web page itself. So, that can be a major cost. It's always a cost. It can be a major cost though, depending on what you want that to be. And if this applicant is interested in being able to host retail capabilities on that website, the cost goes up even more. So just if you're paying a developer, if you're doing it yourself, at minimum, just the domain and hosting platform. But then the applicant also mentioned things like paying for SEO, for boosted posts, for analytics. Those things also have costs with them that I don't see in the budget. So I just thinking about feasibility, I would be curious if, has this artist even explored things like an Etsy platform, things where the resources, the infrastructure exists. There's not a high cost to get going on that. And just has that been considered yet? There's certainly artists. I ordered stuff last week from folks who really have their full-time business mostly through Etsy. So just be curious about that. And then finally, for community engagement, there's a strong online community of similar makers, which I think is potentially really helpful and a way to explore. I would have a similar question about, is that online community, could they really be tapped into? Because this applicant talks about similar kinds of makers, right? Who make similar products. So is that an opportunity to use that community to further refine the exact product that this applicant is making? How is it distinguished? in that community, in that marketplace. And then I am also curious about, this application is really, really focused online. Are there brick and mortar? Are there art fairs? Are there local spots to test out some of these sales as well? You know, I'm thinking about like market research too, before investing heavily in all online sales. Are there some closer to home, maybe a little bit less cost prohibitive ways to test out some of this?
So yeah, Brent, I think summed up a lot of my thoughts as well. I think establishing an online retail presence is a great step towards achieving this applicant's goal. Even better, I really liked that they had already started networking with another artist in another part of the world. You know, setting up that retail space is great, but networking with that other artist is a great way to tap into an existing community of individuals that are already, you know, really plugged into this style of art. So I think that's a great thing to continue doing, and to maybe find some additional outlets for that as well. I would echo the feedback about an Etsy store. That was one of my first thoughts as well. Websites are very expensive, and setting up your own retail space is very complicated. There are some great resources out there. Etsy is one of them. PayPal is another. Oftentimes those platforms come with, you know, in addition to ease of setup, they kind of have their own promotion and marketing components as well within their own viewership. So there's a lot to potentially take advantage of there as well. I also had some concerns reading through some of the long-term goals for revenue growth. I think breaking even in the first year is a great initial goal, but then to go from breaking even to $15,000 in profit in the second year felt like a big leap to me. So I would suggest maybe that the applicant go back and think about revenue growth maybe as more of a percentage rather than a linear increase between years. You know where you are and you know where you'd like to go. So maybe don't put a specific date on your long-term goal of $30,000 a year. If you started the goal for your second year at something maybe a little bit lower, around 5,000, and then set a goal of, you know, maybe a 50% growth in revenue each year, that would still get you to 25 grand within 5 years. And, you know, with budgeting, especially when it comes to income, you know, 50% growth each year is fantastic. If you were to get more than that, even better. But since this is kind of depending on your livability moving forward, I think conservative is usually the better way to go. If you overshoot those estimates, fantastic. It just puts you a little bit further down the path that you're on. But if it's the opposite and you don't hit those milestones, that poses some challenges that are better to get ahead of, I think, on the front end rather than the back end.
Thanks for saying that, Phil. I forgot to say that the one other thing I would say is open an LLC for this applicant if they haven't already. Especially if you're really wanting to make this a full-time business, that will separate your business expenses from your personal expenses. And yeah, if you don't come up on some of those growth goals, or if you even take a loss, that's built in a little bit more to an LLC than if you would just be doing this with your personal finances.
So for me, you guys brought up some things that triggered some thoughts for me, because this is such a specialized art, unlike the other ones where we had the ability to say, you know, this might be too broad. If this artist does not use something that is already established, how would the general public like even find it? And so I don't want to set them up for failure, especially with their robust expectations or forecasting around income. For me to look for something, I think that's something we really need to share with them. When I go look for something for someone who is unique, Etsy is the first place I go. I didn't even think about that. But that is the first place I go. So for me, I think one thing that has to happen is, instead of spending funding on building something that does not have the protections and does not have the consumer protections, so, you know, protections on both sides, it's important to make sure that as we think about ability to grow and sustain, we're using platforms that are tested, tried, and true, especially when given so many data breaches that have happened. we had our major hospital here in the city shut down for 8 weeks due to a data breach. So I don't want to set them up for building something on their own. Something happened to it and no one wants to buy for them ever because of this. When you use a platform like Etsy or PayPal, there are some built-in protections on both sides, and the fee is nominal enough that it won't hinder the ongoing work. And it also is long-term. So when you build your own website, someone has to maintain it. These platforms are already there and can be maintained. And then also, someone mentioned the community of who this is a small specific group of people that this art will be utilized by. So we have to make sure that we are placing them in a position or giving them tools that will place them in a position to be successful. Because I have not done any research on how the sales go in this area. Is that budget, which is feasible if it can happen the way it's written, is good, but is that realistic?
Any other thoughts?
Just a few. I wanted to say I really appreciated the fact that contingency was listed in the budget, because that's something that I hadn't seen. Like, even regardless to whatever else I feel about the budget, like, you at least do, like, oh, I need to put some money aside just in case. The other thing that I wanted to see in the budget, and maybe I just missed it, I wanted to kind of know, like, a price point for the work. And so, like, what would be an estimate of, like, sales that, the goal was really large. And so, but, like, that goal has to be broken down into sales. And so I just wanted to see sort of that piece of it. The other thing, as someone who has sold this kind of work in shops, I know that there is a specialized market for it, and it's a great market. And so I really appreciated reading in the application the planning for when you would be making specialized fairies or whatever for certain holiday seasons, because that let me know that this artist had thought about their product enough and their market as well. So
fantastic. Thank you. Michelle?
I would just like to affirm that we all love a good fairy, and it's just nothing more exciting than walking through the woods and getting your nature on, and you look down and there's this cute little fairy garden that someone has planted. So yeah, it's good work.
Thank you. Thank you for that love. That is wonderful. Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead. We got 2 more. Our next applicant is Sunday Mahara, I think. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We have Phil as the first reader, and then Tori as the second reader. And then Michelle is actually, I think Chapin has already put her into the waiting room since she has a conflict of interest. So Phil, have at it.
Well, yeah, so just kind of digging in, I felt like the goals for this particular project sounded very achievable. Creating an online presence, again, a great way to elevate your work as an artist so that you can move from part-time to full-time. I particularly enjoyed looking through some of the sample projects that were posted on the applicant's website. That was incredibly helpful just to kind of get an idea of what exactly was on the table here. While I think the goal of establishing an online presence again and a retail space is great, I would have liked to have seen, I think, some goals for sales and revenue as well. Even tying back into the last application, what would one of these pieces ultimately sell for if it were going for a retail value? What would be a good goal for earnings and growth each year to eventually get yourself to a point where this would be a full-time career, since that really does kind of seem like the long-term goal for this particular project. Also would have liked to have heard a little bit more about what exactly would be changing from the website standpoint, just to kind of elaborate on how exactly that would get you from point A to point B. The budget, the feasibility, very simple and straightforward, which can sometimes be a good thing, but in this instance, again, I think I would have liked a little bit more detail on how you're going to get from where you currently are to where you would like to get going, based on the particular expenses that you would have. For example, what are your plans for selling your artwork? Are you planning to sell it through your own website, which again would be costly and kind of difficult to set up and maintain? Or again, you could go with one of those platforms like Etsy or PayPal that would have some of those protections and some of that infrastructure that could get you get you started, while also providing you some savings that you could potentially use on promoting your art through social media or some other marketing outlets. From a community engagement perspective, I think there's a lot of great ideas for community engagement, from participating in art shows to networking with other artists. But again, even in this section, it felt like the applicant might be relying a little too heavily on a new website as the solution to amplify their presence as an artist, kind of a be all end all to where they would ultimately like to go. And websites can be great tools, but it's really about what you do with that website that ultimately makes a difference. So hearing specifically about how this applicant would use the website to promote their work, or how they would encourage individuals that they meet to go to the website and view some of their work, or is there a way to promote the website to folks that you maybe haven't already met in person? To address some of that, social media provides a lot of great and cheap, often free tools to help promote yourself as an artist. I think finding a way to more specifically include social media and that kind of promotion into your goals and your community engagement plans, I think would definitely help with the promotional efforts.
I am second reader, right? Yeah. Okay. So I thought this application was really concise and clear. One thing, and maybe this is something that this may just be me, but I would like to be able to sort of know the dimensions and size and things like that of the work that you are wanting to sell, because that makes a difference on what your budget looks like. That makes a difference on shipping and those sort of things. And so it was great to have the website to go to look at, but also in the budget and things like that. That is an important factor that's not there. The other piece that first off, I love this application because I like when people like, this is what I need, this is what I want. And so one of the things that was really important in the application is he said, when I'm out, people are always asking, how can I buy? And is there a website? So this is answering a need that people are telling him that is there. And so I thought that was really, really helpful. Sorry, I'm toggling between two. The two things that I thought would be helpful for this application were to have a projected month for the website launch. I didn't see that in anything. So if you are planning to relaunch your website, having a specific date in mind for when the relaunch will happen. And then as far as community engagement or buyer engagement, what are you doing up until that process of relaunch to get people excited about the relaunch of your website, engaging people in before you have this opportunity to begin to sell your work in a different way. So that's all.
Very helpful. Other thoughts? Okay. We're good to go. Then our next and final application is William Jarrett. And our first reader is Tori, but let's make sure that Michelle's back in. There she is. Tori, have at it when you're ready.
To remember to unmute. Again, another really clear and concise application. The budget was clear. I don't have a lot of feedback on this one because it was, there was a lot of clarity in what they wanted to do and what they needed to use the funds for. I do want to say that I really appreciated the personality that came through in this application. And that made me excited about the potential of what could come from this. Community engagement with this one was very specific. So there's a very specific market for art sales and the type of art. And so I wondered, could this artist imagine what it would look like to engage the community a little bit more? If you're planning to do studio shows and things like that, or gallery shows, what does that look like as far as community engagement? So, but that's pretty much all the feedback I had. This was really clear.
Great. Wonderful. Brent?
Okay, I have some questions about the goals, and maybe Tori, you can help me. So based on the narrative and then looking at the budget, I felt like there was a little bit of difference. So in the budget, it truly is all, the budget's really about supplies, right? And buying supplies for this applicant to make, I think, a new body of work. And then there's some line items about having some of the work photographed and then reproduced as prints. So my question about goals, though, the budget seems to indicate one thing, the narrative a little bit different. So it seems like, I think my assumption is that the goal is really tied to producing this new body of work as it's based on the timeline given and the budget. But so I guess what my question is like exhibition of this new body of work, is that really the goal? Is increased sales and getting the work to collectors a goal? There's a mention in the narrative about like making new work that's different somehow than previous paintings. Like, so I would just love a little bit more specificity about like, given this money to buy new supplies, what does this lead to exactly? And so on feasibility, I would say I just need a little bit more clarity on what those goals are to help me understand feasibility. So the proposed timeline is the whole year, and it looked like most of that timeline is working in the studio, which is great. However, again, if exhibition of new work is a goal, at what point does that really happen? Does that happen within the timeline of this? There's a different goal mentioned about expanding the geographic reach of where artworks are exhibited. And that's maybe a little bit different strategy. That's maybe assembling a portfolio of existing work rather than producing new work necessarily. Or if the goal is like an increase in exhibition or in sales, then that maybe is a little bit different timeline feasibility, making those like high quality art prints and really like doing the marketing and sales of those might be more of a direction to focus on. It's just one that seems like it has a lot of different goals, a lot of different ways that it could go. And so I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding which one exactly that is. And then community engagement, I just want to say that I think of what's mentioned in here, the biggest potential for that, I think, that mention of that utilizing that existing relationship with Huntington Arts Center, where you've got a community of artists. There's mention about maybe doing some kind of collectors night, open studio night. Having been on the back end of curatorial and in galleries and museums, I will say seeing that kind of single event where you can see like lots of artists, lots of studios is so much more attractive than unsolicited portfolios arriving in the mail. So yeah, that kind of like community group effort seems like it has a lot of potential. Sorry, that's kind of a lot.
Tori, I thought you were going to chime in.
I was, and then I got interrupted by two small people.
Of course.
It was, for me, maybe I made assumptions about what the goal was, because it seemed really clear to me that the goal was to create this new body of work to display in 2022. And then like if sales happen, that was cool. From the tone of the application, I felt like that was really sort of like the goal is to create this work, that this is something that this artist wants to do. It's large scale, they need the materials. And then the prints were a part of the budget because that's a part of it. But for me, it was pretty clear, like they have applied for shows in 2022. And so this is what they want to do with this grant money, is to be ready for that. So.
Other thoughts?
I just had a little comment that I wanted to toss out there, is that, this whole experience, the whole kind of training wheels for them is wonderful. And I hope this applicant goes on to apply for a lot of other grants. But for me, there's a fine line between personality and professional. And I feel like if you're not a strong writer, it is good to have someone help you with that, so it is clear and concise, and that we can actually understand exactly what you're saying. And I don't mean to be the grammar police, but it does help. if someone else helps you with that. And there is nothing wrong with getting assistance to have someone help you get your clear ideas down on paper. So I just want to encourage this person to, when they apply for many grants in the future, which I hope they will, that they have someone help with the writing portion of it, just so that it doesn't deter the reader. I had some challenges kind of sorting through what they were trying to say, and that didn't need to happen. So I just think that in the future, hopefully they can have someone help with that, just kind of the crafting the message of the proposal. That would be helpful.
I think that's a word for everybody who's applying for a grant for anything.
And so most organizations, to just what you just said, Chris, most organizations have grant writers, or there's a support team. When we're talking about individuals, I don't know if there's a way to craft the questions to get to what we want. Like the in-kind, having an in-kind part on a grant is just great. But if they don't understand what that means, how will they know where to put those things? And how have you looked for resources that might be shared with you from your community? I don't know if we can help them in that way, especially since these are individuals and not organizations. Give them some basic tools or promptings to get them to what we need. Because for me on this one, I was really excited that the expenses look like real expenses for a project. So, it's very hard to hit a project right at budget of the ask. But on this, where does this other funding come from, and how are you? They mentioned like some of the tools that they would use for, like the studio space rental. It's $26,000. Truly, we should be able to get that at some kind of in-kind cost. What does that look like? How do once they are approved or receive this, is there a way that we can come back to them and give them some supports around how to maximize what they are granted? And then I don't know if there's a report back, or how do we make sure that they can apply for the next grant that is not going to come from a group of individuals who want to do and want to see the arts, just grow. So what tools can we put in place to assist so that, this work doesn't just stop after this one grant?
Gotcha.
I want to make another point too. When I say that it's clear and concise, to me, what I'm realizing as I'm looking it back over is that the things that were clear and concise about the goals were in the feasibility section for me. So also, providing information that people know where to put what where. I think that if like if you guys had read that part up at goals, it might have changed the entire tone of the application. So
yeah, well, let's focus the rest of this conversation just on this application, and then we're going to go global. It sounds like a lot more melodramatic than it truly is. We're going to talk about in like bigger things, like to improve moving forward. But let's close out the conversation on this application. Any other thoughts or input or concern? Great feedback. Well, then we are going to go ahead and close. Don't you guys leave, but we are going to close officially this panel review of On-Ramp 2021 of Northeast Indiana. Thank you all for watching. And Chapin, you can go ahead and